Now, what birds have you got on your farmland? Farmers in Wales are being encouraged to get out on their land to record what they see for this year's big farmland bird count, which gets underway later this week. Last year, 75 Welsh farms joined up and organisers are hoping to increase that number. Matthew Goodall is from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, which runs the event and has already been out spotting birds for us and finding more than you might think are around in winter.
So we've got in there's a dunnock singing, the blackbird as well, and the great tit. There's some blue tits in the background. There's plenty of kind of robins about that are really easy to see at this time of year. Great tits and blue tits, blackbirds especially, really common. And so people should see lots of those as they're going about, but then perhaps more rare things as well, like reed buntings or greenfinch, meadow pipits, skylarks, long-tailed tits. So those ones there are a bit rarer. They're classed as amber listed in Wales. And then things like if people see a bullfinch or linnets and yellowhammers or lapwings, and even starlings, they're all classed as red listed in Wales, so they're even more rare. So that's the kind of things that people could expect to see, as well as things like obviously house sparrows or dunnocks, and then they may see crows, jackdaws flying overhead, buzzards, red kites, kestrels. You know, some of the other common species that people will see at this time of year are more of the migrant species coming in. So there's lots of redwings about, and there's lots of fieldfares about. So in the morning's definitely the best time to go, or kind of later on in the afternoon. They tend to go a bit quiet in the middle of the day.
Yes, plenty to spot. But this is aimed at farmers, isn't it? And they're busy people. What do you want them to do on their land exactly?
So we're only asking farmers to go out for 30 minutes into an area of their farm where they're likely to see birds and just take 30 minutes to record what they're seeing there. So to go to those kind of areas where they'll have lots of birds at this time of year, and maybe go to, you know, the edges of woodland or where they've got some scrubby cover near to a watercourse where they might get a few more birds around. This time of year there's not much foliage about, so you can actually spot the birds a little bit easier. There's not that much food around for birds at this time of year. It's actually called the hungry gap. So that hungry gap is from kind of December until the end of April, or sometimes even into May. So it's just highlighting actually that, you know, it's important to go and see what birds you've got about at this time of year, and actually to get really kind of invested in those birds and try and help them as much as we can. So some of the ways that we can help them, as people do in their gardens, is obviously we would like to talk to people about is supplementary feeding and feeding of farmland birds. So that can be done through dedicated farm and bird feeders, or in some instances bird feed can be spread on farm tracks, but also we can provide natural seed for them through planting things like cover crops, so wild bird seed mixes and things like that. And where that's done, that really makes a huge difference to birds on farms.
Do you think there's a mind to change things? You know, what do you hope farmers and the government can do now to help birds which are in trouble?
Well, we've got an awful lot of research. I mean, our demonstration farm, which is over the border in England, over in Leicestershire, the Allerton project, we've got almost 30 years worth of data there about how we can fit wildlife into the farming environment, and we can have profitable, productive farming alongside wildlife. A lot of that research has been done in an arable setting, but the important thing here is that it's not reinventing the wheel. It can be done, you know, in livestock farming in a grassland setting, and actually we've got some research that suggests doing these type of things, putting in wild bird seed mixes and supplementary feeding, has a magnified impact when it's done in a grassland setting, because when you look out, you know, at this time of year across the landscape that is farm for livestock, there's very little seed available at this time of year, and hence why, you know, we have had some of these declines in farmland birds. So that's the whole kind of ethos of this, is doing what we can, whether it's planting cover crops, whether it's supplementary feeding. It could even be things like putting up nest boxes, managing our hedgerows so that they are, you know, producing berries, or even things like in really intensive silage fields, leaving a 5-6 metre strip of ryegrass to set seed. That again has shown that it can make a difference. It's because it's just about providing food through this time of year, really.
So you're going to send the farmers out onto their land to spot what's there, but what's going to happen to the information that you gather?
So we use that information really to demonstrate what farmers are out there and doing. So, for example, in Wales last year, we had some farmers take part and we recorded that 25% of those farmers in Wales that were doing the big farmland bird count actually are doing some of this supplementary feeding. But also we get information such as 25 red listed species were recorded, and 9 of those red listed species were in the 25 most commonly seen species list on farm. So what we try and do really is demonstrate that actually farmers manage the biggest area for wildlife in the country. So it's really key that we're not talking about nature reserves. You know, if we can get this right, if we can manage farmland in Wales for wildlife alongside productive, profitable farming, so farming for food, if we can get both together, this can have really great results, and that's what we want to really use this to demonstrate.
Matthew Goodall, and if you want to take part in this year's big farmland bird count, it gets underway later this week, and details of where to get your forms are on our Country Focus webpage at bbc.co.uk/Radio Wales. That's it for this week from me, Caroline Evans, and the Country Focus team. Thank you for listening and stay safe.